Tax Explained. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. In this video, we'll be talking about the new Bomas Convention Center, the center where an important summit, the African France Summit, was supposed to be held. Where we talk about the summit that outgrew its deadline and how Kenya's new Bomas dream failed its first major test. In May 2026, Kenya is hosting one of the most politically significant diplomatic gatherings on the continent, the Africa-France Partnership for Innovation and Growth Summit. Heads of state, ministers, investors, diplomats, as well as business leaders are converging in Nairobi for talks centered on innovation, economic partnership, technology, climate financing, and Africa's changing relationship with France. The summit comes at a delicate time for Paris as it struggles to maintain influence in parts of Africa where anti-France sentiment has intensified in recent years. Yet, behind the diplomatic speeches and polished state receptions lies an uncomfortable reality for Kenya's infrastructure planners. The event was supposed to be officially held in Bomas International Convention Centre, and it was supposed to be an official unveiling of this complex. This will instead be held at an aging but dependable Kenyatta International Convention Centre, which is Reliance KICC. The symbolism could not be louder. For months, the new Bomas complex had been marketed as the future of conferencing in Eastern Central Africa. It was to be bigger, more modern, more technologically advanced, and capable of placing Kenya among the world's elite conference destination. The old KICC, despite decades of service, was increasingly spoken about as outdated infrastructure from another era. Officials praised the new project while quietly treating KICC as a facility whose best days were behind it. But when the deadline arrived, it was the KICC that stood ready. Bomas did not. And in that irony lies one of the most important lessons about public infrastructure planning in Kenya. If KICC were a person, perhaps it would have said this, and I quote, "See now, you are coming back to me after bashing me as old, dilapidated, and outdated. You rushed to build a new facility at the Bomas instead of first modernizing me. You have upgraded, had you upgraded me properly, I would have continued serving you even better for many years to come, just as I have faithfully done in the past. Instead, you hurried into constructing a bigger facility, which you still need, yes, while I was left carrying the burden and criticism. I am tired too." That imagined statement captures the mood surrounding the failed timeline of Bomas project. The promise behind Bomas. Bomas International Convention Centre was conceived as Kenya's answer to the growing global meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition industries, commonly known as MICE sector. This is a highly competitive business of attracting global summits, exhibitions, trade fairs, diplomatic meetings, and this injects billions into local economies through tourism, hotels, transport, and investment. The government argued that Kenya was losing major opportunities because existing facilities could no longer compete with convention centers in the cities such as Kigali, Cape Town, Addis Ababa, among others. The project therefore aimed to create the largest conference facility in Eastern Central Africa. According to the government statement, the complex would include an 11,000 person capacity, 5,000 seat main convention hall, 3,500 seat auditorium, 1,500 seat ballroom, presidential pavilions and VVIP lounges, hotel and commercial facilities, extensive parking and road infrastructure, modern digital conferencing technology, security systems designed for high-level diplomatic events. President William Ruto repeatedly described the project as transformational investment that would position Kenya as Africa's premier conferencing destination. The government even announced that the African France summit had already been booked for the facility before construction was complete. That declaration was meant to inspire confidence. Instead, it became a source of pressure. There is again its time. Construction officially began in March 2025 under a highly accelerated schedule. Government officials said that up to 3,000 workers were operating around the clock to ensure completion by April 2026. But project management experts often warn that compressed timelines on mega infrastructure projects create serious risks. When governments commits politically sensitive deadlines before design, procurement, and financing and implementation are fully stabilized, execution becomes driven more by political urgency than technical reality. That is exactly what appears to have happened to Bomas. By April 2026, construction was still ongoing. Roofing works remained incomplete. Interior finishes had not been finalized. Access roads were still under development. Small structures planned in the original design were unfinished. Parliamentary committees inspecting the site publicly admitted the obvious. The facility would not be ready in time for the summit, which was to be held in May, early May or mid-May. The deadline quietly shifted from April to September 2026. However, the summit had to move on, and the venue chosen was the same KICC that had earlier been overshadowed by promises of a newer and grander future. Why was the deadline missed? Several factors appear to have contributed to the delay. One, there is overly ambitious timelines. The scale of the project alone have raised concerns about whether completion within roughly 1 year was realistic. Mega convention centers are among the most technically demanding public facilities because they comprise of structural engineering, hospitality systems, security infrastructure, digital communication networks, transport integration, and diplomatic grade functionality. Completing such a facility within a politically fixed timeline was always going to be difficult, and it was. Second, we have the scope expansion. As construction progressed, reports suggested that the project expanded significantly beyond the initial concept. Cost reportedly rose from approximately 30 billion Kenya shillings to figures exceeding 42 billion Kenya shillings, an additional cost of approximately 12 billion Kenya shillings. That's a staggering amount. In project management, this is called scope creep. When additional features, requirements, or modifications are introduced after implementation has already started. Scope creep often leads to delays, procurement complication, and budget overruns. Third, we have procurement and audit concerns. The project has also faced scrutiny from oversight institutions. Reports cited concerns raised by the Auditor General regarding procurement process and financing arrangements. Some reports described aspects of the procurement as illegal and irregular. Whenever audit questions emerge during implementation, decision-making slows because contractors, ministries, as well as supervising agencies become more cautious about approvals, payment, and accountability. This fourth, the political pressure. The summit became both a motivator as well as a burden. Once leaders publicly linked the Africa-France summit to the Bomas launch, the project stopped being treated purely as an infrastructure and became a political promise. Political deadlines are rarely flexible. Construction realities are. Eventually, reality won. Now, the KICC question. The return to the KICC has reignited debate over whether Kenya ignored the simpler option, modernizing existing infrastructure before launching an entirely new mega project. Kenyatta International Convention Centre KICC remains one of the most recognizable buildings in the country. Since its completion in the 1970s, it has hosted major international conferences, trade exhibitions, and diplomatic meetings for decades. Critics now argue that instead of aggressively marketing KICC as outdated, the government could have invested in phased modernization. improved digital systems, upgraded interiors, expanded parking, modern security infrastructure, traffic redesign, and transport connectivity. Such upgrades would have likely costed less and even delivered immediate benefits, while Bomas Complex proceeded under a more realistic timeline. Now, Nairobi residents are expected to endure significant road closures as well as traffic disruptions around the central business districts because the summit will be held at the KICC. Had the Bomas facility been completed as promised, much of that congestion would not have happened. It would have been redirected away from the city center toward the most spacious Langata corridor. Instead, Nairobi returns to a familiar logistical headache. The controversy around the project. Beyond delays and cost, the Bomas project has also attracted environmental criticism. Some activists and conservation voices have been raised over reported plans affecting land near Nairobi National Park. Critics questioned whether infrastructure expansion near protected ecological zones was justified for commercial and diplomatic purposes. Other questions the transparency surrounding contractors, subcontractors, and financing structures. Parliamentarians themselves reportedly demanded greater disclosure on procurement details as well as payment arrangement. At the same time, supporters of the project argue that Kenya cannot compete globally with outdated facilities. They insist the long-term economic returns from conference tourism will eventually justify the investment. That argument is not without merit. Global conferences hosting can generate enormous economic activity such as hotel occupancy, airline traffic, restaurant revenue, international investment exposure, tourism growth, as well as diplomatic influence. The challenge is not whether Kenya needed a modern facility. The challenge is whether the project was planned, sequenced, and communicated responsibly. Now the bigger lesson. Infrastructure projects are not judged only by their architectural beauty once completed. They are judged by planning discipline, budgetary control, delivery credibility, operational readiness, as well as public trust. Bomas project may still become a landmark success in the future. It could indeed transform Kenya's position in international conferencing and business tourism. It may eventually host world-class events and generate economic returns for decades, but the missed summit deadline has already left a big dent on its reputation because first impressions matter. And this project's first major international appointment was missed. And now the conclusion. The story of Bomas International Convention Centre is no longer simply about the building. It has become a reflection of how Kenya approaches mega projects with ambition, speed, political declaration, as well as enormous expectation, but often with timelines that struggle against reality. As diplomats and heads of states and governments gather at KICC this week for Africa's France Summit, the old convention center, that is KICC, will quietly remind the country of something important. Reliability still matters. For all the criticism directed at it over the years, KICC remained firm when Kenya needed it, and this time it needs it. The unfinished Bomas complex, meanwhile, stands as both a symbol of national ambition as well as a warning about the cost of overpromising before delivery. Kenya wanted to showcase its future. Instead, it was forced to rely on its past in the name of KICC. So thank you for reaching this far. If it's your first time here, please consider subscribing to this channel. You can watch other videos that you have done on this facility, other projects in Kenya, in East Africa, and Africa at large. So let's meet in the next one. Thank you.